with his newborn. He shared a picture. Actually, I should share that in the chat. He shared a picture on Twitter yesterday.
How are they doing? Is he like full zombie mode, or are they
I
actually getting
don't
any
know.
sleep?
I don't know. I haven't asked him. And I don't know. I don't don't rub it in. I don't miss those. I mean, there's part of me that like misses the squishy baby, but I also like my sleep.
Yeah.
Oh man. And it's so nice when you can say go take a bath or shower.
Ooh, we're not
They
there
might
yet.
they might throw a fit about it, but they'll do it. They can do it. They have the potential. So the other nice one is when you get in the car and you can say buckle up. That's another
Yeah, we crossed that
plus.
bridge. That's nice.
Oh man. But my kids got out of school yesterday. Yesterday was a half day. So it was a little crazy. And their teachers have sent like tons of stuff home. And it's
Same,
like,
like the
we
amount of
don't want this.
papers we got. Yeah, it was nuts.
We're like, there's also like workbooks that are this thick that's like, how many pages did you fill out? Like 5? Like,
Yeah, we need like an end of the year bonfire where you just throw it all in a
yeah,
fire pit and
yeah, for
set
sure.
it on fire.
Okay, I'm gonna include a link. Whether the unfortunate thing is sometimes people are like, oh, James isn't here, and then they jump off. But here, I'll include this in the chat. So James is out. There's his sweet little baby, Jamie Catherine. So, all the fun things. Let's see. We can probably just go ahead and get started, and the people that'll continue to trickle in will continue to trickle in. All right. Okay. Welcome to another episode of Compressed FM, a podcast all about web design and development with a little bit of zest. Today, we are going to be talking all about software development and getting started and what that transition looks like. Okay, so note to post, this is where the intro song would go. So, my name is Amy Dutton. I am the Director of Design at Zeal, and today I have my co-host, Brad Garapi.
Hey, I'm Brad Garapi. I am a front-end developer at Atlassian working on Confluence.
And we have a very special guest, Leticia, who has written a book called A Friendly Guide to Software Development. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Leticia. I'm a software engineer at Stripe and the author of A Friendly Guide to Software Development. And I'm very happy. Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, for sure. So what did that process look like? Do you have a different career and then you transitioned into tech?
Yeah, I originally graduated and then did a master's in oceanography. And for those who don't know what it is, it's basically the study of the oceans, which is a very beautiful profession. I wanted to work on something environmental, something that would be like the future. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with programming and I started teaching myself to code just because I thought it was fun and, this kind of things. And ended up deciding to switch careers somewhere along 7 years ago.
Okay, so I gotta know, like, oceanography. Like, go into more detail, right? Because was
Yeah,
there any connection to programming or anything like that?
more than you can expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually my second year in college, I got this like internship. It was like a research internship kind of role. And in there, I started working on MATLAB, which is this data analysis kind of software. It has its own language. It looks a lot of like data. It's very focused on matrices and arrays. And I started like doing some data analysis about like rivers and if we're trying to find some correlations there. And as I would, do these things, I was like, okay, one, I really like this, and two, I think I'm like, it's easy for me to understand. And from that, eventually, I met a few folks that were really like into programming. They would program since they were like, in high school or something. And they were like, well, if you like MATLAB, you should totally study Python, because like Python has modules that will do everything that MATLAB does, but it will give you the power to do so much more. And then I started like discovering this whole world of programming that I didn't know existed.
I feel like MATLAB is bringing me back to my college days. I was an electrical engineer, and so we did a lot of
Okay. Yeah.
arrays and matrices to do circuits and stuff. Um, but yeah, then when you find out you can automate it all, it's like moving from like Microsoft Excel into and like VB script into like a
Yeah.
full-fledged programming language where you're like, I can do anything I want now.
Yeah, definitely. And MATLAB has also like this interface build up. So like you can build interfaces with that. And I really found that fascinating, right? Like you can build softwares and, create this desktop applications. So it was like really amazing when I discovered like there's even more to that.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I think Python is your primary language of choice, right?
Yeah,
And I feel
definitely.
like traditionally Python maybe isn't associated with any kind of UI development, but it's great at like crunching numbers and data science. So, how
Yeah.
did you kind of pick Python, or why did that come to the forefront when you were considering learning how to program?
So Python chose me more than like I chose Python. Um, Again, I'm a huge nerd. I like studying like random things, and I was at the time studying programming. And there was this Python meetup at the city, at the town I was working. So the guys who recommended me Python were kind of like, "Hey, MATLAB is kind of like Python is kind of like an easier MATLAB with more powers." And so like I started studying that, and I thought it was very like way more easy, way more intuitive than MATLAB. And then there was this um, community being formed in my city, and I decided to go, just because. And then with that, I started getting involved with the Python community, and then teaching women how, like other women, how to program, and kind of like building events, and then doing talks, and then writing blog posts about it. And so it was kind of like this getting more and more in love with the community, and then the language was just like super powerful. So like, why choose anything else? Also, at the time, I was working on this like so we used to work on this maneuverability of ships kind of software. And so I had to build this like really dense maps with like lots of layers, that was super heavy. And I used this program called ArcGIS, which is super heavy. So we use like satellite images. It would take me like 4 days to build like 15 kind of maps. And then I discovered that ArcGIS was completely automizable by Python. So I built this script, was my first like useful script ever. And my job went from like 4 days to 10 minutes, right? And then I was like, okay, I definitely found something here, because, I got so much time back.
That's
It's
awesome.
it's crazy to me because I feel like when you apply tech to industries that really need it, real estate is always an industry that comes up in my mind where I feel like they could benefit from tech and programming and applications. Like the benefits just are so immediately transparent like that.
Yeah.
Yet then, you've got entire companies that all they do is software, and you feel like there's endless possibilities of code to write, problems to solve. Um, but yeah, when you bring tech to a non-tech industry or to an area where it hasn't been exposed and automated, benefits are huge.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
So how did you start learning Python?
Okay, so this is like way back in 2012. So there was not as much resources online that we have as we have today. For me, the like the point in time where everything changed is that I found this like MIT courseware website, where their intro to like computer science, I think it's 600 or 601, I don't remember, was for free, right? And so I was
Okay.
like, watching computer science in Python for free, like from MIT in like this random city in Brazil that I was living, Um, and also like this, again, these guys that I used to work with, they were really incentivizing me. So they were like, oh, I doubt that you can, read this file and do this, and kind of like giving me small challenges to like incentivize me to study. And then again, as I said, like I went to my work and I discovered that ArcGIS was customizable. So I started like for the first time putting all this like random things that I was studying in practice.
That's awesome.
How did you think Python was as like a first language? Do you know any other languages? And have you ever looked back and thought, oh, maybe, that was a tough one to start out with, or no, that was the right choice for you?
Oh, definitely the right choice. I studied a little bit of Go, a little bit of Scala, and I work in Ruby mainly for the past few years. But Python would definitely be my language of choice. Like I think it's getting so many advances, it's getting so fast. So like if you see all the data science stuff and like powerful tools are being built in Python, and in Python combined with other like even more powerful languages together, and it's so easy, like in many instances, if the code is well done, right? Like reading a Python code is almost like reading an English text. So I really like that, and I really miss working like on day to day with Python.
But you're Ruby now, right? So
Yeah,
is that safe to say that like Stripe is using Ruby for some
yeah,
projects?
it is. Yeah,
Is it using Rails specifically, or?
no, it's like its own thing.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Yeah,
I have very limited to zero experience with Rails, but
me
Python
I
was
too.
an
know
early language that I was using back at Dell to do a bunch of automation type stuff.
I know just enough Rails to be dangerous. So Zeal is primarily Rails and React, but I just make marketing pages. So I can generate a page, add some HTML and CSS to it, and ship it. But that's about it.
Let's go back a little and talk about like your involvement in the communities and how maybe that was probably important in continuing to push yourself forward. Learning to code can be like really frustrating and really hard and almost isolated if you don't have like maybe a group of people to talk to about it or answer questions. Did you have that experience, and do you feel like, those groups were the things helping pull you forward?
Yeah, definitely. And but most importantly are some people in those groups. And so basically, like it sounds nice, right? Like I went to a Python event and like everything was like nice and shiny. The reality was that the first Python community event that I've been, I was the only woman, like only woman that was like actually studying programming. And like I got there and I was like saying, these things that I was doing like this tiny script and using NumPy and like some very specific languages. And everybody there was super nice, and they're like, yeah, sure, you're a programmer, like yes, you're like super welcome here. Then I got to 4 hours or 3 hours, I don't remember, like it felt very long, of web development talks. And I sat in a corner of the room where I really couldn't leave. Like I would have to cross everyone to leave. But I had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. It was completely like they were talking alien. And I sat there for like 3 hours, like feeling so stupid, right? Like,
Mm.
why am I here? What am I doing here? Like, I'm wasting time. I'll never come back. And again, like in retrospect, it made sense. I was doing data analysis. The talks were about web development. But for someone who were doing that as like, a nerdy thing, like just for fun and never expected to have anything coming out of that, that was super scary,
Mm.
frustrating, like many things, right? Um, so I left and I never looked back. I was like, I'm not going to come back, right? Like, I'm not going to waste my time doing this. And then, so some of the people who were there realized that this happened. And like another event happened, I didn't appear. Then another, I think two or three happened, and they realized that I wasn't there. So they invited this guy to do this talk about NumPy, and then I started receiving multiple messages, right? Like, hey, next event, you're going to have a talk like for you, like you should totally come. And kind of like, at least I remember at least two or three people texting me, right? And when I got there, I got like this huge reception and people telling me like, oh, you felt frustrated because it's like a completely different area. Like that's normal. Nobody there was really understanding necessarily, this kind of things. And so, and then they started like, let's make a group of women, like, let's, like, you can teach other people. And then like from that, I started getting more and more involved. I actually became like director from the Brazilian Association of Python that like help organize events and things like that. I organized like a local regional event for like 300 people. So like it was a gradual like growth within the community, but also like there was this group of people who cared, like they really cared, right? And so of course like finding communities is important, but like finding communities who have people who really care,
Mm.
I think that is the main difference that I found there, and that completely changed my life, right? Like if they never called me back and they never join a Python event again or a tech event again, and so the story would be very different.
Man, that's awesome. It sounds like, yeah, your particular peers were like very involved with your journey and very supportive. And
Mhm.
that's, sometimes it can be hard to find, but that's awesome. You found the right group of folks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other
And
thing that I really like about your story is so many times I feel like I have blinders on when it comes to web development, that there's so many other applications for programming beyond just web development.
definitely.
Yeah. And
And
that,
like
go ahead.
sorry, this is one of the reasons why I decided to do the book, right? Like and the book is kind of like the tip of the iceberg, but the idea is kind of like showcase a lot of things. And not only like programming is way more than just like web development, but like software is way more than just developers, right? And so like this kind of like myths have to be broken and more people have to be included on this conversations.
So beyond just like your interest, was there anything else that motivated the career change? Did it come with any like, monetary gains or promotions or things like that that helped you say like, yeah, I really made the right choice here?
Definitely not. So there were a couple of things. I was working on this like engineering consultancy company. I had a good job. I was very stable in my life. I think I was doing a good job, but like the area I was working is very, very specific, right? And so like if I wanted to change jobs to like, I don't know, get a raise or,
Mm,
change a little bit the career path I was going, I would have to change cities necessarily, right? Like you have one or two companies in each city. And so like I can't choose the city, then choose a job. I had to choose a job and then just like accept the city. So it was very narrow in terms of opportunities for some of the things I wanted to do. And I didn't want to change where I was living. I was very, very happy there. Um, and so the opportunity was kind of like dropped in my lap, and I was like, well, should I take it? Should I not? And I'm very bad at translation, but my mom always have a saying that says like a horse that's ready for you to ride will never like go past you twice. So
interesting.
I had this opportunity and I just like decided to try. Like worst case scenario, I come back with my like I ask for my job and back or I'll figure it out. But it was very scary. It was a way lower salary than I was
Really?
having before. Yeah, and much farther away. So I wouldn't have the money to drive by car. Like it would be too much in gas and like parking spaces and all of that. So I had to go from like a 15-minute commute by car to like a 1 hour and a half by bus. So definitely not easy, but like something told me I was doing the right thing, right? But that's not to say that it was easy. I cried like the night before. I called my mom and I was crying and I was like, what did I do? Right? Like I made this huge mistake of like getting a lower salary, like further away place with in an area that I know nothing about. So it was not easy. It was not easy. So like of course now I have a good job. I moved abroad. I moved to Dublin. So I have a lot of things, a lot of friends and career growth that I wrote the book, which was like the dream of my life. And all of that came for that because of that decision. But it
Mhm.
was definitely not like an easy one.
It's interesting how some of those pivotal moments almost feel like self-sabotage.
100%.
When we moved from Chicago back to Nashville, we had a great life in Chicago, but we were moving back to be with family. And so that was the whole reason we were moving. And we knew that it was the right thing to do, but it just felt weird, messing up our life in Chicago because we loved it so much. But, again, that's what we feel like is the right thing. And that's opened up other different opportunities because we've moved.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe you have that switch in your brain like the rest of us do, where it's just like programming is just so interesting and fun and never ending. And there's always something to learn where you're like, I'm going to be happy with this for a really, really long
Yeah.
time. And so I know I'm being drawn in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. To be honest, like, I don't know, it was so chaotic,
Yeah.
that point in my life that is hard to say like exactly why I choose what I chose. Um, but I think like I'm so glad I did. But again, like I always say, of course, I had a lot of privileges in that I have a good family. I had my mom who could like I asked her to help me like
Mm-hmm.
financially while I was making this transition and all of that, and friends who supported me and helped me out when things go because things didn't go smoothly like right after my first job. So like there's a path between your first job and actually becoming confident in your new
Mm-hmm.
career. And I had a lot of support, like both financial from my family, but also like emotional from my friends and loved ones. So like there's a lot to consider in it's now that everything worked out is very easy to look back and say like, oh, it was really nice, but like there was a lot of help involved.
Mm-hmm. So walk me through the timeline. What did that look like as you were going from this job to where you are now at Stripe?
Okay, so let's see if I remember everything. So I started studying like programming, like Python around 2012. Um, then I got my first job like later that year as an intern. Like internships is a little bit different in Brazil. Then I got like my real job in 2013, 2014, like full time. Then 2015, I joined my master's, which is where I decided to do everything in Python. That's the year as well that I joined the Python community. Then 2016 was when I got my first job. I changed jobs a little bit in a couple of companies between 2016 and 2018. So my first 2 years were kind of like going through some like companies, see what I like, what I don't like. Then in 2018, my partner got it, which I met through Python community as well, which is a whole new other story. Um, so he got an offer to move to Dublin. So we decided to move together. And so I couldn't really get a job in Brazil, like because we were on the process of moving. So I found out this internship called Outreachy, which is basically like Google Summer of Code, but for minorities. And so you don't have to be in college, right? So the idea is to stimulate minorities to underrepresented groups in tech to apply to internships with open source groups. So you work for 3-4 months getting paid to work on open source projects. And the idea is kind of like boost confidence, improve CV, get experience, all of that. So I passed to work on the Jupyter Hub uh, project, and I met some amazing people there. And so like it was kind of like doing this project while I was moving to Dublin. And then I applied for Stripe, and I've been in Stripe ever since.
That's awesome.
That program where you go around and work on different open source projects sounds really, really amazing.
It's
Like,
only one project, but you
oh,
work on
just one.
that
Okay.
for like 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah,
cool. And Jupyter
it's
Notebooks
really
is
cool.
like
Yeah.
a big deal in the Python community. So it's like
Yeah.
very perfectly positioned for what you were wanting to do.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bit different. So I worked on the Jupyter Hub, which is kind of like the infrastructure to run multiple Jupyter notebooks in like companies or for classes. And
Okay.
so it was more like web development. I developed this new logging system for Jupyter Hub. But I was close enough with like Jupyter, and I met like all the Jupyter community, and it was really, really nice. I super appreciate, and I have a lot of um, gratefulness for my mentors there.
I will say, like, I feel like every decision that you made along the way kept pushing you in the exact right direction, right towards data science, down to the language you picked, down to, these projects you worked on, and then ultimately landing at Stripe. I feel like some people's journeys are a little bit more like zigzaggy, where they're like, I kind of got it together along the way and wound up at a final point. But yeah, you had some really good focus and foresight there.
Kind of like data is my love, like is the thing that I'm the way I was taught to think is with data, but I'm actually a backend developer today. So I'm like very,
Okay.
although like everything pushed me towards data, I'm very much into backend web development these days.
Okay. Well, this is a really great transition to talk
Yeah.
about like entering into Stripe. I've actually interviewed with Stripe before, and I had to say, like, 100% hands down, the best interview experience I've ever had. How was your experience going through that process? And like, what kind of stuff are you doing now?
Um, yeah, the process was amazing. I was, well, at the time I didn't know like Stripe so well. Stripe was not present in Brazil at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And like I met this woman who was amazing, a great engineer there, and I was like, I want to be this woman. I want to work with women like that. But then I started like studying about it once I applied, and I was like, oh, this is like huge, right? Like this massive, like super important company. um and but the process was so nice, everybody was so helpful, and I just fell in love with everything, and luckily I got through. And so I work today on our Stripe tax software. So basically Stripe tax is our software for sales tax, VAT collections, and all this kind of this part of the process of the payment flow. And I've been there for a long time. But I really like, it's a complex area full of nuances that I really enjoy.
One thing that I wanted to ask you about, you had mentioned confidence earlier. How long did it take you in your career to feel like, "Oh, I'm confident. I know what I'm doing"?
Will I ever get
Are
there?
you still Well, and I think that it's like the trick question is there's always something to learn, that people
Yeah.
think that, seniors have it all together and have everything figured out, but it's like the goals keep moving, you know?
Yeah. So what I say is that like confidence comes in cycles, right?
Mm,
So when I
that's a
was
great.
getting yeah, so in when I joined, it was my first full-time job in English, right?
Oh, man,
Which
I didn't
is,
even think about that.
yeah, that was a challenge of its own, right? And so like when I started, it was like every day feeling pretty insecure, right? And then as time went by, it's like every week, then every month, then um, and so it's not to say that it doesn't happen, right? Especially when you have something else, right? Like maybe it's not related to work, maybe you have a family problem, or you're feeling very tired, or you're feeling sick, and like on those days your confidence level just like goes down. But what I like, there's like several curtains of that, is like what does it showing up means or being good means, right? Like, and one day is like a full cup, and then another day is like a half a cup, and the other day is like one fifth of a cup. And so it's kind of like in average, how do you go about your career and about yourself, rather than like every day. And so I actually have a really good blog post where I write about that, and like I have my strategies is for like fighting my imposter syndrome, and like fighting when I'm not feeling confident, is actually writing about my career and what I'm doing in like multiple levels. So I have a daily work diary where I write everything I work. So
Mm.
sometimes you spend 3 days in the bug and you can't really find the god reason why that thing is not working. And it's not that you stay 3 days not doing things, right? Like you don't have anything to show up, but you did things. So I write like, oh, I tried this, then I tried that, then I
Mm.
talked to this person, and then I have like, even though 3 days went by and I didn't solve it, I still have kind of like a proof for myself. This is like just me, nobody else
Mm.
sees it, but like I have proof to myself that I didn't do nothing on those days. Then I have kind of like brag docs, which is kind of like what I worked in the past 6 months. And then I have like a year review where I kind of like write down everything that happened to me that year, like good, bad, things that influenced me. So like because it's in cycles, the confidence levels, I also like write my achievements in cycles so I can, fight them in multiple levels.
That's awesome. I love how you phrase that confidence comes in cycles. It's true. I've never really thought about it that way though.
Yeah, and having all these work journals is very important, not only to like to show your manager, but yeah, to prove to yourself that you're making progress and that
Mhm.
there are good days and there are bad days. I've never thought about having um one in particular where you just like write down frustrations. Like that'd be an interesting one to have where you just use it to vent and then maybe later you're like, wow, I understand that better now.
Mm,
Yeah.
Or, yeah, that's still a problem. Maybe somebody should solve it, or maybe that's my next problem to solve in the future.
yeah.
Yeah.
From a design perspective, I think that's one of the things that even separates juniors from seniors is like, I know as a senior, I have a proven process when I'm doing design or doing programming and trying to figure something out. And that gives me confidence moving forward that even if I come to a project and I don't know what the next step is, I know that I have this process that I'm going to go through and be able to figure it out. And so I'm sure for you, it's like, okay, when I encountered a problem like this before or a similar problem, like these are the people that I talk to. This is my process. And that helps you be able to move forward and get over that hurdle sometimes that mentally can be even more overwhelming than the problem itself.
Yeah, definitely.
Very cool.
So, at what point in time along this whole journey did you write your book?
I was going to ask the exact same thing.
Yeah, so I joined Stripe in May 2019. Right along there, I started meeting a lot of people, both in Dublin and in my company. And I started to talking to some people. And one of my passions is kind of like teaching software for my mom's friends, like my friends who came from other areas. And so this is something that I've always enjoyed doing and kind of like doing these weird analogies that like don't make any sense to someone in tech, but like that may be really nice for someone who's not in tech. Um, so this is always something that I enjoyed in this process of learning how to do software, especially because I come from this like teaching myself, right? Like, so I had to do some like crazy analogies in my head. And so I met some people and they were like moving from a traditional company to this like very big tech company. And they were like, I'm very stressed out. Like I've never worked in an environment like this. Like all this like tech words are floating around, and I have no idea what they mean. Like I'm terrified I'm gonna get fired. And they didn't need to know tech for their job like as much, but like they were feeling very frustrated. And I was like, oh, there's something there, right? Because that person's feeling is not, you know, like unique. We know that all the time. And a lot of the times people I talked to about tech, they were fascinated about it, but they were scared that they were not like, smart enough or whatever. Um, so I had this idea. Okay, what if I write a book about software with technical terms, but for people who are not developers and they don't want to be developers, they just want to understand the world that, like, we're all into now, right? Like we all have smartphones, and our elevators are smart and our fridges are smart and all of that. Um, so I started like, okay, maybe this is an idea, but I shelved it, right? Like as I said, it was my first job in English, moving to another country. Like there was a lot of things going on, and my brain simply couldn't handle everything. So it was kind of like, even with blog posts and community events, I just like kind of dropped everything because I just needed time to process all that. Then the pandemic happened, and I had all this free time in my hand, and I was like, well, like I might as well like do a proof of concept. Can I even do this? Um, because like again, I want to talk about like deep technical stuff, but I want to do it in like friendly way, like a way that's so basically I spent about a year like just in like not even a chapter, I would say like a couple of sections of the book, and kind of like iterating and like giving it to friends and then receiving feedback and iterating. And then um about a year after that I was like, okay, I have something. Like I think I think this can go somewhere. And then from there, I actually like started the development, and it took me about a year and a half to like actually finish everything.
So like when you're writing this book, are you just like typing it in a Word document? Like, are you using any special software to do it? Because when I think of like people sitting down to write a book, I don't even know the first step that I would take.
Yeah, I decided to use latex. Um,
Okay.
I used it before in my master's, and like you don't have to worry about formats and all of that. And also you can use GitHub to version your book, right? So like lots of advantages, and I've seen that a couple of publishers. I At that point in time, I was not sure if I was going to self-publish or not. Um, but I was like, okay, versioning, and I don't need to worry about formatting. Like, it's all good, it's all perfect. So I just did latex from the beginning to end.
That's awesome. And how long did it take to write kind of like from beginning to end? And did you have to do any major rewrites when you were asking for feedback from friends and family?
So it's 2.5 years from like my first ever page to, okay, my manuscript is done. Like, I'm never going to touch this again because I can't take this anymore. um, and sorry, what was the second question?
Did you have to like do any major rewrites or rethink sections? Like, did you get a lot of feedback that really changed your direction?
Definitely. I have a mentor, great Luciano Ramalho. He wrote Fluent Python, which is like bestseller of Python, and he's a friend and a mentor. And I talked to him multiple times about it, and it was very like received ton of feedback from him, from some friends also, like they're not from the tech area. And I think the major like learning was that the chapter that was like my proof of concept was like my first chapter is now chapter number 4. So
Oh, interesting.
I was, even though I was like writing for my, a very basic audience, like basic in terms of like technical software development kind of audience, I was still going like too deep, too fast, even though I had this,
Mm,
thought in mind. So it was not like a major rewrite in that per se, but it was kind of like, why are you talking about, IP address or, internet, if like you didn't explain what a browser is? And I was in some senses like, okay, but should I go as basic as this? And so like there was some debate there.
mm.
But at the end I was like, and in the book I actually like, hey, bear with me, like maybe some of the things are very basic to you, but like I think I want to, make sure everyone is in the same level before we go deeper. um so not so much as like rewrites as much as of like evolving the idea and making sure like I include everyone really, like, and not only, you know jumping too fast into very technical subjects.
Yeah, I think it comes down to like understanding your target audience.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like even when you're writing a blog post, a technical blog post, you're like, well, how many layers of this onion do I have to peel back? Where do I stop? Where do I start? Because this can't be an encyclopedia. It's got to be, whatever, 2,000
Yeah.
words, and that's that.
Yeah,
It
that's
also
super
I
hard.
say it also
Sorry.
goes the other direction too, because you have to figure out like how many layers am I gonna lay on? When am I going to stop? Because it can be endless.
I think the best advice that Luciano gave me was to think of my book as an MVP.
Mm,
So, like, what is the minimum version necessary for this book to be useful? And I thought that this was very liberating, right? Like, that was
mm,
very, okay, so I don't need to put everything on the book. And so, like, entire, like, chapters that I thought would be like one chapter, like, became idea for like full books, right? Because the book's actually is going to be a series, so a friendly guides to technology. So we could have like entire books from chapters that I like. If I did a chapter, it wouldn't be the same as like if we had a friendly guide to whatever topic we have here. So thinking about that and kind of like thinking what is the minimum I can put is really like, it was really liberating in a way.
mm.
That's awesome. Yeah, like think of everything as a draft, or done is better than
Yeah,
perfect. All these phrases to help you
Yeah.
ship things, right?
yeah.
I love that.
And can I shift gears or do you guys?
Of course.
Okay. So I was gonna say, shifting gears, you love to travel too, right?
Yeah, very much.
So, okay, that's what I thought. So, is your with your job, do you just work remotely or do you just go on trips on the side? What does that look like?
Trips on the side.
Okay.
I think now is the first time I'm working remotely for fun.
Okay.
But I usually what I do is, any holidays, bank holidays, I put 1, 2 more days. Like Europe, one of the reasons we wanted to come to Europe is everything is very close. So
Hmm.
like if 1 hour, 2 hour flights, you can go like a lot of places with completely different cultures and all that. So I'm taking full adventures of that.
Awesome. What's your favorite city? Do you have a favorite
Oh,
city?
if I don't say someone Brazil, I'm gonna be in in a lot of trouble.
Okay, do you want me to qualify that? What's your favorite European city?
Okay, that's that's a tough one. I'm gonna say Dublin because I live there and I really like
Yeah.
the city. But for traveling, I really enjoy Amsterdam.
Okay.
I
Never
I
been to
hear
either
Amsterdam
place.
come up all the time.
Yeah, it's very cozy. It's like a small city, lots of like good food and good bars. On summertime is really beautiful. And if you go into Amsterdam, go in April where they have like the tulips. So you can go to the
Oh,
parks and see like I know it's a very like, see flowers, but like it's very, very beautiful and I really like it. But
that's
Ever
Dublin
been
is
to
super nice and summer in Dublin is amazing.
ever been to the States?
Yes, a couple of times.
Yeah. Where have you been over here?
I went to PyCon US in Portland, which I
Okay.
okay.
absolutely loved. Like I love the city. It was my first time. I went to San Francisco a couple of times, um, Orlando for a conference as well, and Washington,
Okay.
D.C.
Yeah. San
Yeah.
Francisco's okay. But that's where all the tech happens, so
Yeah. Funny. And it's funny too when you say the cities. I'm no, it's just like this in Europe too, but it's like each city has its own personality. So, like when you're
Definitely.
listing off, I'm like, okay, what is the perception of the United States like? Based on those
Yeah,
things.
definitely.
uh, Eric in the chat's giving you a hard time because you didn't say San Diego. He said insert city here, but I know he lives in San Diego. Um, hopefully I didn't reveal too much about his location. Let's see. Brad, what other questions do you have?
um I'd get into
Or
more Stripe stuff if
yeah,
you
let's
wanted
do
to.
that. Do that.
Yeah. Okay. So you've been at Stripe for like what? 4 years, I think you
four
said?
years.
2019
Yeah.
is when you started. Um how has the progression been there? Like what was it like being a new hire at Stripe specifically? And then have they given you like a good path forward to get promoted, progress, learn more things?
Yeah, definitely. And it's gonna be annoying. Like I have a blog post about that as well. I'm gonna say that a lot. But
That's
yeah,
so
so
awesome that
Yeah.
you've written everything. We can talk about that later too, but sorry,
Yeah, I
continue
do
on.
want to go back and talk about the website because anybody with a good personal website and like lots of posts, A plus.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it was amazing. Like I met so many amazing people that taught me so much. Like the bar is very, very high. And but at the same time, people were so nice. And the Dublin office in particular, like it's super fun. So I really like that. And I love the opportunity of like learn, right? Like a lot of things are written down. There's opportunity for you to read and learn from like even projects that you are not working on necessarily. So I love that, and definitely I've been growing. I've started on Stripe Tax right as the project was beginning, and I've been there for like a long time. So I was able also to see the evolution of the product itself, not only like the engineering but like the product mentality, right? Like how do we think as we begin a project and how we grow and all of that, um, and how we do we integrate with other stripe products. And I absolutely love that. So definitely been a major career growth for me, like really, really good one.
Okay, I think my biggest question about Stripe is that they set the bar so high from UI design, from API design, to developer experience in testing environments, to documentation. Like everything is on point. How in a company so big do they keep everybody like not only on the same page of how things should look and feel and work, but also like having that same mindset? Like nobody's taking shortcuts. You can feel it in the product as you use it. Nobody's just taking the easy way out. Everybody is so on the same page. So how in a company so big do they keep that culture?
Good strategy, right? um, I think we have a really clear strategy. I think people are really willing to collaborate and help you on achieving the goals of your project. Of it's a full mentality of focus on users, focus on getting good products out of the door and making sure we're doing the best for our customers. I think that's like the whole mentality of everyone you work with. So whenever you're discussing a project, you get help from other people to make sure you're doing the most quality work you can do.
And kind of like a follow-up question, do you feel like that perfection only exists at the surface level and then like some of the code underneath is like a giant mess? Or do you feel like really from the ground up everything is like well organized and perfect?
Yeah, no, I think like we always have areas to grow and improve and things like that, but like qualities is the priority, right? Especially because like a bad code, wherever it is a bad code, right? Like it
Mm.
can lead to bugs, to reliability issues, and all of those things. So like quality shouldn't be overlooked, even if it's like just internal.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, I've always envied Stripe's engineering culture, and I feel like there's so much to absorb from being at the company and absorbing and learning from everybody there.
Yeah, it's really nice.
I don't want to cut you off if you have another question. I was going to say we can go ahead and do picks and plugs because I want to make sure we also have time to in the show. Or if anybody in the chat has questions they want to add, feel
I
free
was
to
going to bring
ask.
back the personal website
Yeah,
thing,
let's do it. Oh
but
yeah, I forgot. Let's
yeah,
talk about that.
yeah.
That's perfect.
Okay, so Stripe's amazing. And you've written about so much, including like your start at Stripe on your personal website. When did you build that, and what technologies did you use to build that?
Okay, another thing like that I like to talk about is this is not my first version, right? Like, and the fun fact is that if you actually put like v1.libertala.com, you'll find like the
Nice.
first version and then v2, and I think this is v4. And so it wasn't born like this. And I actually started on Medium, right? Um, and so the thing that I always try to say to people, especially people who are beginning, like you don't have to have uh, a ready to go or the perfect version of something to start. So I started on Medium and I wrote there for a long time. I think my first website was kind of like just to, share some links and have some kind of like spreadsheet organization of like Portuguese and English blog posts. Um, and then I decided to do something different and then something different and then something different until like I got to this like latest version. So that's one point of it. The other thing is that so technologies that I use Hugo on as like a static generator of web pages. I use GitHub to store the code, which is all there. Like the other day, someone sent me a pull request fixing a typo on my blog or something like that, um, which was nice. Then I use Netlify for the deployments and the goat counter for stats, which I also have a blog post because I changed from like Google to goat counter and I wanted to see how they would perform.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to hear how this goat counter thing is working in comparison to Google Analytics. I've never heard of it before. Did you like the transition?
So the transition was super easy for me. My partner was like playing around with it, like launched the server of it. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna use it. So I let it, like both of them run for 6 months. I'm not gonna remember everything, the results. Like there were differences, right? Like differences that I could understand because like Google has way more information than Code Counter will ever have, right? So there were some differences that that could explain, some difference that I couldn't explain. Um, Overall, like if you're not like super interested, I thought it was like they were kind of the same. um, but I like it. Like Goat Counter is open sourced. They have a free, I think, on their website. If you go there and if you have less than a number of viewers, you can get like the free version of it.
That's nice.
So I wanted to do something that was less Google and like less like I don't have ads or anything. Like I wanted like less and less, um, you know, Google things or like privacy issues for the people who want to read my website.
Nice. And is this a hosted service or do you have to host it?
So yeah, there's a hosted version if you are under a number of views that you can go to their website, but we have our own.
Sweet. Yeah, this sounds like a
that's
great alternative. I just need to know how many people click on stuff on my website. Like I don't need a bunch of information about them or anything like that. Just like tell me how much traffic I get. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And like for that, it's more or less the same. I
Yeah,
think
great.
maybe because it doesn't have Google Analytics, it is a little bit worse off in terms of SEO. It could be. I feel like there's a little bit less traffic than you used to. But I'm fine. I'm not doing this, for, major views. I just want to have a place that's my corner on the internet.
Yeah.
I've been using Fathom, which I really like, but you have to pay, like I think I pay $14 a month and I can put on as many sites as I want, but it is an extra expense.
That's pretty steep.
And one of the
14
things I'm
bucks a
gonna
month.
say is like in Brazil, $14 a month is super expensive, right? Like
Really?
so a lot of the, online available things that you have that are like considered cheap in the US like might be super expensive in South America, Latin America. So like I also always try to use like free technology as much as I could.
That's great. On your website, you have several different posts in different languages. And
Yeah.
well, if you want to comment on it, you can. I was just going to say it's not translations though. So I've clicked through it. It's like certain posts are written in different languages, right?
Most I try to translate,
Oh, you
like some of
do?
them,
So you're
yeah.
like writing it 3 times.
So 2 times. I don't speak Spanish, but
Okay.
the posts in Spanish were a colleague of mine, a friend of
Okay.
mine that was like, I'm learning computer science. I love your blog posts and I know Spanish, so can I translate it as part of my study? And I actually like told them that they could put it like the translated version on their website,
Sure.
but they kindly said no, that they wanted it to be available on my website.
Oh, wow.
My native language is Portuguese, and so I try as much as I can to have everything in Portuguese at least, because like we don't have the most content, right? Like most blog posts, most technologies are written in English,
Yeah.
most content is generated in English, and in countries like Brazil, Latin America, speaking English is quite a privilege. So the most I can put like content in Portuguese, I try to always, like if I write in English, I always try to translate it because I know like speaking English, reading in English is quite a privilege. So I try to always have in Portuguese. But I've been writing in English more and more as like it's my day-to-day job and it's getting more comfortable. But I always try to be mindful with like I want to generate good content for my country and for people who don't have the privilege to study and afford, studying English.
Yeah. I don't know if this is a dumb question or not, but when you're programming, all that's in English, right? You're
Yeah,
not okay. So that's it
yeah,
would be another barrier to entry for somebody that's wanting to get into development if they don't, not only from a
definitely.
content perspective, but from a writing perspective.
I think it's way difficult, right? Like way more difficult to people who don't have any notion of English. Just like as I said, Python, oh, it's beautiful because it's kind of reading in English, but I spoke English, so that was easier for me. But like a for loop, right? Like for something in something, like it's just words if you don't know the language. So that's why like I definitely feel like we need more content in like localized languages,
Mm-hmm.
because it's so important. It's a massive way of including people who are not necessarily the top percentage of population
Sure.
that can pay for, studies.
What would you recommend for somebody like me? I'm embarrassed I only know one language. It's just English. But I am totally open to people translating stuff. Would you recommend reaching out to translators, or like I know Chat GPT might be getting to the point where I could say, hey, translate this, but it's one of those things where if I automate the process, I have no clue what it's translating it into.
That's a tricky one, right? And when you think about open source, I think that's like comes the importance of
Mm,
communities, right? So like in Python Brazil, we have like sprints during Python Brazil, so people that speak English can translate, right? Like you need community efforts to do it. On like more professional levels, yes, I would recommend a translator or something to make
mhm.
sure, you, for instance, in Portuguese, the height of a room, it's called like left feet,
Oh,
left foot, like
interesting.
it's a weird translation, right? So like things like that can happen on automated, like when you're not using
Mhm,
the slang. And another thing that's difficult is like not every word is translatable.
mhm,
So like some words you might find a translation, but nobody really uses. So you might as well like either put it in English or put it in Portuguese with like an English,
mm.
I forgot parenthesis.
Parentheses, okay.
Um, and so you have to have these nuances to be considered as well.
Mhm. Interesting. Brad, are you good?
I'm good. Yeah,
Okay.
that was everything I
Well,
had.
awesome. Well, we can get into the next segment of the show, and this is where we pick something that we like and we plug something generally that we've worked on. It doesn't have to be tech. So, Brad, do you have any picks and plugs for us?
Let's see. I've got a pick. I recently bought a Nintendo Switch, and I've been having a lot of fun with it.
You-
Uh, I'm playing Zelda for the very first
The
time.
new
Like I've
one?
never, yeah, the new one,
Okay.
and I'm just getting the hang of it, getting the groove of it. And I'm like, this game is massive.
Yeah,
So,
that's what I've heard.
um, yeah, taking a nice break from like coding on the side to play some video games.
There is an older version of Zelda that they like remastered for the Switch that I love because I played it as a kid. So I'll have to send you the link. I don't remember which one it is, but it
All
was
right.
fun to see like my son play it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that level.
Yeah. Yeah, and Gooseman, I hear you, but I've got a big gaming PC, so I don't need a Steam Deck really. I'm looking for something like I kind of got it so that I could play with my kids and my wife, too. So I got picked up
Sure.
Mario Kart and everything, so good excuse to have some family time.
Yeah, that's
And
fun.
for my plug, just my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Brad Garapi. Still haven't released a video, but one in a while, but I'm still marching towards getting monetized and trying to get those view times up.
Oh yeah. So people just go play his videos in the background.
There you go.
You can mute them if you need to, but just get that watch time. That's awesome. Uh, Leticia, do you have any? Leticia,
Yeah,
sorry, I said it wrong. Leticia, do you
yeah.
have any? Sorry.
Yeah, it's very, again, very nerdy. I'm reading the Staff's Engineer Path. It's a book from Tanya Riley, sorry. And like I have a lot of like, comments about like general career books about tech. Like most of them feel very frustrating for me coming from a non-CS background. And although this is from like a next level for me, which would be like staff engineering, I find it very human, very personal. I really, really, really like that. Um, and for plug, I'll say my book.
Yeah.
I I'm really happy it's out. Like it's the dream of my life. No, it's like my ultimate goal in life, and so like whenever I can promote it, I will.
Awesome. I'm just grabbing a few links here. Sorry, give me just a second. And then I need to look up. I have a backlog of pick some plugs. While I'm doing that, Northern Chimp in the chat asked about James. He's doing great. So they had their baby last week. Her name is Jamie. And I haven't talked to him a lot. I'm sure he's living the newborn life right now. So,
Yeah, I talked to him a little bit. He seems
to
say everything's going good, so
yeah.
baby must not be too hard.
Sorry, give me just a second. I think I have something if the database will load. I'll start with a plug. Well, I'm waiting for Notion to load. So I'm going to plug the Learn, Build, Teach Discord. So this is a Discord that James runs, speaking of, and I'm a moderator on. So it's a great place if you're trying to find that community that we talked about, try and support each other as much as possible. You can ask questions, whether you're a beginner or a junior or a senior, whatever, wherever you are on your coding journey, we try and be helpful and encourage one another. So for my pick, I'm going to pick HelloFresh. So I feel like I heard a lot about HelloFresh during the pandemic because people didn't want to go to the grocery store, but we've just recently picked up a subscription to it because just having to do meal planning and all that can sometimes be difficult. And it has been fantastic because we get a box of food on our doorstep every week with different meals that we've picked, and everything has been delicious. So honestly, it's better than any of the restaurants that we have around us. So we've really enjoyed doing that. And it's given us more variety than like our standard recipes that we're usually cooking. So we've really enjoyed doing that.
How's the bang for the buck there? Is it like pretty expensive for what it is, or you think it's good value?
Well, I'm conscientious of this because we were talking about coming from a place of privilege and $14 being a lot for analytics. So I think we pay like $100 a week for a box. So that's 3 meals for 5 people, which if we were going to go out to a restaurant, we're
Way
getting
cheaper.
close to that. Yeah, which is, I mean, just the cost of living here is a lot more. So it's looking at like $33 a meal for 5 people. And then depending on what the meal is, sometimes we can even get leftovers off of it. So
Sweet.
yeah, but my kids have enjoyed it. Sorry, go ahead.
I use a similar service. It's not
Good.
HelloFresh, it's another one. And it's like what we say is it's more expensive than doing things yourself. It's way cheaper than, going like for a restaurant. So it's kind of like in between.
Yes.
And it's good to learn like different, recipes and
Yeah.
like tricks and things like that, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. Eric mentioned Blue Apron. We did Blue Apron for a little while when we were in Chicago. And we've liked HelloFresh better, but that was like probably 5 or 6 years ago. So I'd be interested to see how Blue Apron has iterated on that. So, and the other thing, I mean, if you're beginning cook, I feel like I can follow a recipe, but it does a good job of teaching you how to cook. And that's the other benefit. Cool. Well, I think that will do it for today's show. Again, thank you for coming on. We appreciate it. And yeah, it's great to hear about your journey and everything like that. And Brad, thanks for being our co-host.
Always.
So for now, that's all we've got.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm very happy.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to continue chatting on social media. I always like to talk about tech and career and how we can be more kind with each other.
Yes, for sure. And I'll include your social links. That'll also get included with the episode posting. But for now, let me grab a few of these. So this is Instagram, Twitter, and I'm going to do GitHub too. Cool. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out in the chat. That always makes it more fun. And I should have mentioned this earlier because people are dropping off, but I'm actually, is it the phrase a double hitter or a double header?
Double header.
So I've been saying hitter, but I'm sure whoever's heard just smiled and nodded. I'm doing a double header today. So I will be back on at 1 p.m. Central with Josh Medeski, and he's going to be talking about development tools within the terminal. So that'll be fun. But yeah, talk to everybody later. Bye.
Bye.